Hi, everybody. This is Blaine DeSantis, and I welcome you to the newest edition of Books and Looks. Yes, it's our weekly voyage of discovery in the world of books. Books that I've read and authors that I've interviewed, all coming to you each and every week. Yep, anywhere you can find a podcast, we are there. That's right, be it on Spotify, be it on Apple Podcasts, be it wherever, we will be there. And yes, we're now on YouTube. If you want to watch us, you can certainly catch us there on YouTube on the Books and Looks channel. So you want to catch that also. And if you want to have a review of the book, read a review of that book that I read and we're discussing, it's on my website, which is called viewsonbooks.com. Well, today we are joined by C.L. Kara Miller, and she has written a wonderful mystery called The Antique Hunter's Guide to Murder. Yes, we're going to be dealing with the wonderful world of antiques today, something I know little about, okay? Well, you'll find that out as we go through this interview, because I'll tell you what, she knows so much, and I know like a thimble. But we discussed today a lot of fine points about antique. There is a mystery involved here, very interesting mystery, which we can't give away because it's really, really good, I'll tell you that. Twists and turns, characters, dual-sided characters. It's very well done. But we learn about the antiques business. We learn about reproductions, refurnishings, things like that. We learn about the difference between an antique and antiquity, collectibles, heirlooms, things like that. We even get into talk a little bit about Pokemon cards. Yep, Pokemon cards, because they're very valuable, even though they're not antiques. They're collectibles. We're having an interesting chat about this book and the whole thing. And Kara is a wonderful first-time author who has now a 3-book deal. So if you enjoyed this first book, you're going to love book 2 and book 3. I'll tell you what, I heartily recommend this book to each and every one of you. So anyway, without any further ado, let's go right into that interview with C.L. Kara Miller. Welcome, Kara.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a joy to be here.
I hear an accent. Where are you coming from?
I'm British and I live in Suffolk, Constable country.
Okay, good. Well, I'm American. I live here in South Carolina. So, yeah, well, that's good. Now we know where we're at. But, before we get into the book, let's talk a little bit about yourself. Where did you learn to write? Did you take creative writing courses? Did you have to go to college or anything for that? Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure, gladly. I didn't actually. I know a lot of people nowadays do MAs in creative writing and things like that. I actually didn't. I studied English literature at university, and then I went into publishing. I worked with my mother in publishing for a little bit, and then kind of moved out into events and the hospitality. And I'd always kind of written as a hobby, I guess, in my in the time, I had outside of work. I wrote short stories and poetry. I always wanted to write a novel, but I didn't have a big enough idea, I think. I couldn't get past chapter 4 or 5. And then after I had my second child, my son, I was on maternity leave. And luckily over here we get a year's maternity leave. So I decided to take a beginner's creative writing course in a kind of adult education centre in the evening, one evening a week. And within 2 months, I'd started my first novel. But that was 10 years ago. So
that's great.
Wow.
Was that this novel you started 10 years ago?
No, I wrote 3 other novels before this one made it.
Okay. Well, that's all right. That's great. Very good. Did you have a specialty when you were taking literature in college? Did you have the focus on one specific type of or a type of literature?
So I did English literature, so it was pretty comprehensive, kind of the Austens, the Brontes, and onwards. So, yeah, which is kind of standard our universities back when I went to university. That was really focused on.
You didn't spend 2 weeks on Beowulf then?
I did not know.
Good,
I wouldn't have liked to, but I didn't.
I don't get it. I've tried many a time. I just have a hard time. But, well, that's wonderful. Now, this novel, Antique Hunter's Guide to Murder. First of all, you got to know something about antiques. Do you go to college for antiques, or how do you learn that? Where do you get expertise?
Yeah, no, you do. It definitely needs some experience or knowledge of antiques for this particular book for sure. I didn't know. I grew up in the antiques world. My parents were antiques experts, and they wrote the Miller's Antiques Price Guide, which has been going for 45 years. It's called the Bible of the antiques world. And so they collected. So grew up in amongst a lot of antiques. And I think that they taught me without me really realizing what I was learning.
Right. It was just part of your osmosis process. It all seeped in there, and that's really something, because I don't know anything about this. But, your mother was probably the preeminent antique person over there in England. I mean, she's a legend, and you got to work with her. That's really interesting. Was that on a daily or a weekly, or how did you work with her together?
So when I came out of university, I've always wanted to be an author, but I didn't know how that looked like. I didn't know how someone learns to become one. So I called nepotism and asked my mother to give me a job, because I thought that'll be it. If I get a job in publishing, I will learn how to be a fiction author. But because I had no experience in publishing, she rightly gave me the lowest job in her office, which was an assistant editorial assistant, I think. So what I did all day was input captions. So I worked for her for about 18 months, maybe a bit more. So I was putting in captions. So the Miller's Price Guide has a picture of the antique and then a small caption underneath it. And they would send out, people who had greater jobs than I did into antique dealers and auction houses to take photos and to record the captions of what the item was. And my job was to sit in the office and input them. So I did that for quite a while and realized that probably isn't the way you learn how to write fiction. So, I didn't stay there that long, but I did enjoy it. And I obviously learned quite a lot by doing it.
Now, Kara, did you travel? Did your mom travel to places to find these antiques? Did you go with her? I mean, how did that work?
She did. I mean, all over. There's an American edition of the Antiques Price Guide as well, the Miller's Antiques Price Guide. So at the beginning, there was a lot of traveling. Now more so, they collect the information from the auction houses all over. But we used to go, when I kind of worked my way out of data input, we used to go to the antique dealerships with a photographer, and we'd set up a little photo studio and start photos. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's really great. So now, are you doing anything with the antique business anymore? Are you buying, selling, promoting? Are you going to shows? What are you doing? Anything?
So I collect. I collect mid-century modern. I collect mid-century modern jewelry, Danish jewelry. That's kind of my area of interest, I guess. I don't deal. I think my husband wishes I would sell things on, but I don't. I just collect.
Well,
and I keep those.
just keep writing, and you won't need to sell anything, okay? Because the books are great, and this and as you friends, as if you don't know me personally, and Kara doesn't know me personally, I know nothing about antiques. Apparently, I am an antique. I'm 70, okay? So I'm old enough to qualify. Other than that, tell us a bit about, how do you determine what's an antique, what's an antiquity, what's collectible, heirloom, vintage? I don't understand the terms. What tell us a little about the terms of antiquing.
Okay, so an antique, the kind of hard and fast rule, I guess, is that it has to be over 100 years old.
Oh, I'm not then. Oh, good. Oh, good.
Yeah. Collectible is kind of that 100 years to the present day. So I actually don't collect antiques. I collect collectibles. And well, if you want to go into antiquities, these are ancient artifacts. So I think that's around the 5th century to the 15th century. So up to medieval times. And if you want to get an idea, if you can see my beams above me, I'm currently sitting in a medieval cottage. So it's quite old. They are old artifacts.
Okay. Now, vintage, is that something too? What is a vintage? Is that a term or is that a time period?
Yeah, I think vintage and collectibles are kind of intertwined in terms of age, if you like. Vintage is something that is kind of old, but it doesn't go as far back as what we would classify as an antique.
Do you see, and from your knowledge, and what we glean also from the price guides, is you get older and older, does that make the item more and more valuable, or can you have extreme value on newer items?
Sure. I mean, some of the new things, Pokemon cards, if you want to go down the Pokemon card route, there was a beanie thing, toy phase for a while. There's quite a few of very collectible modern items that are generally rarities, things that are rare that, collectors are building a collection of and then, can't get enough of and will pay substantial amounts for them. For sure.
All right. Okay. So we have over here, people collect baseball cards. And
Exactly. Yeah, baseball cards are great things. And decoy ducks too. Decoy ducks are highly
decoy ducks. What is a decoy duck? I've never heard
that. I think it's for shooting. They put them in the water.
Oh, okay. I thought it was something else. Okay, that's decoy ducks. Yep, people collect decoy ducks. Isn't that something? I'm learning a lot today, friends. I'm learning a lot. I hope you are too. Thank God Kara's with us. I'm lost. Now, okay, and Kara and I have had discussions about this. One of my favorite shows, all I know about antiques, I learned from a TV show, British TV show, love it, Ian McShane, called Lovejoy. I love Lovejoy. I could not get enough of Lovejoy. I've seen the series 3 times from beginning to end. They called Lovejoy a divvy. Now, they meant that he was something like special. He knew just getting near something, he'd get like an itch in his fingers, and he knew what was real and what wasn't. Are there divvies? And is that a term or what? Tell us a little bit about that.
So it's interesting. I know you brought it up earlier, and I kind of had heard the term on Lovejoy. I mean, I was quite young when Lovejoy was on, but I do remember on the telly when I was little. And I'm from a generation where there was only a few channels here in the UK. So it was on a kind of Saturday. It was one of the big Saturday evening shows. So we'd all sit around with my parents and we'd watch Lovejoy. So I kind of knew the term from there. When I looked it up again, it's true. There is a terminology that the divvy in the antiques trade is someone who can instantly spot something that's valuable. There's also another kind of connotation where it means someone who's not very bright. I did actually ask a couple of my dealer friends, like, do you use this term? Is it used nowadays? And the general consensus was it's probably not used nowadays. And it was probably brought to fame in Lovejoy. I think Lovejoy was so big and so popular that they kind of, although it was known in the trade of something they said, but yeah, I think he made it.
Is there another term? First of all, do people have this ability? And if so, do they have a term for that?
So my mother used to call it someone who had the eye. And I think that's very similar. Someone who, I think from what she was always saying was about the fact that someone who had a wealth of knowledge, who was very trained, could instantly spot, just kind of glancing across an auction room, what we would call a sleeper. And a sleeper is something that maybe hasn't been identified as valuable, but really is. So someone with the eye could identify a sleeper.
Okay. Well, one of your characters, and we're going to get into the book in a second, but one of your characters, is her name, do I pronounce it Freya? F-A-Y, Freya, F-R-E-Y-A, Freya?
Freya.
Does she have that ability, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I never went into it too much in the book because I think it's a bit of a kind of weird term in the fact that someone might think that it's some kind of instinct, whereas I think it's built far more from a knowledge base. But absolutely, I think she has the ability to walk into a room, which is what she obviously does in Copthorne Manor, and understand quite quickly what she's seeing.
Yeah. When I read that, I said, there's Lovejoy. I said, that's our female Lovejoy. She knows exactly what's going on. So you can tell that I love that show, can't you? Oh, my. Well, now tell us a little bit about the book. What's it about? Tell us a little bit about the main characters and the plot, because we got people want to hear about this.
Sure. So The Antique Hunter's Guide to Murder follows the story of Freya Lockwood, who's at a crossroads in her life when her wonderfully eccentric Aunt Carol calls to tell her that her estranged antique hunting mentor Arthur Crockleford has died and the death seems suspicious. Her Aunt Carol calls her back to Little Meddington, which is a small medieval village in Suffolk in England, and Freya begins to see that the death is suspicious, and she is left a letter by her late mentor, and she begins to follow the clues.
Okay. So her aunt is there. Does she have are her parents around? Freya, does she have parents in the book?
No. So her parents died in a fire when she was 12, and she was from that point on brought up by Carol in Suffolk. So they have a very close family bond, which is why she goes back to help her.
Okay. Now, Arthur Crockleford. Love the name, okay? Arthur Crockleford is dead basically by the time we get into this book. And yet he casts a shadow over this entire book. As a matter of fact, each chapter has this little pithy statement that he has said about antiques or the business or something. Are those real statements, or did you make those up?
I made them up, or most of them I made up. There's one in there, and I can't tell you which chapter it is because I think there are 53 quotes. But there is one that my mother used to say, which is that if you're at an antiques fair, always turn left because everyone else is turning right. And if you turn left, you'll probably get to the stalls that haven't yet been searched. So there are a few of those that I kind of knew from my childhood and growing up, but most of them I had to come up with.
Well, you know what? What it does is it connects us with Arthur, because we don't get a whole lot about Arthur, but all these little statements connect us more and more to him, and he sort of leads us through the book and leads Freya on her adventure and everything else. I think it's extremely well done. I really kudos to you. Great little pithy quotes. But anyway, did you always intend Arthur to have this big of a presence in the book? Or did you, when you got halfway through, you said, I think I'll put some statements in that's going to bring him into the book more?
Yeah, those quotes definitely came in late in the day. He did have quite an input, but they were on different drafts. They came out in different ways, I think. And then when I first I have, luckily maybe I have 3 editors. I have a Canadian, an American, and an English editor. And when my deals came through and we had our first meeting together, they asked me to come up with maybe a different way and another way that we could really involve Arthur in the story, because he's so much a part of it, because he kind of has put the breadcrumbs down for Freya, and he's leading her not only to, hidden antiques and stolen antiques, but also kind of leading her back to who, she was meant to be or who she could be again. So yeah, I think that was actually a really lovely kind of collective idea of, maybe, and I'd put a few quotes in other places. And so it was thought, well, maybe we could put them in at the beginning of chapters.
No, I like that, because Freya apparently left the business, and then, like you said, breadcrumb brings her back into the business and reawakens, I guess, her love of antiquing and the whole industry, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and I think that I like the idea of that we come to crossroads in our life, and at these crossroads, you start to rethink maybe what you want or where you want to go, or you have time. And Freya does that. She's in her late 40s. Her daughter's left for university. She's divorced. Her house is being sold. There is a kind of what next moment. And I think that is, she gets to choose that there was something in her past that she loved doing and that she still holds a passion for. She still goes to museums. She still kind of retains the knowledge that she's always had. And now she can kind of put it back to good use.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Now, this book is basically set in England, but you also take us to Cairo, Egypt. Now, that's a big part of this book, but why Cairo, and why Cairo instead of maybe Istanbul, Budapest, other places that had mystery and intrigue? Why'd you pick Cairo?
It's a good question. For a few reasons, I think. In the first book, Cairo's very identifiable. A lot of people know Cairo. They know the pyramids. It's quite an iconic site. So I think that's easy for the reader to kind of conjure in their mind. I had read an article, and I have never been able to find it again, but through the kind of reams of research that I did, there was an article about these items that had been stopped at a British airport, and they were cuneiform tablets. And these tablets had come from Egypt, and they were trying to find the warehouse in Egypt where they had been, stored. And those writers, they're only little, all we need are little hints to kind of light the imagination. And that's what it did for me. So it was always Cairo then.
I know I've read some other mystery books, and again, Cairo keeps coming up. I don't know why it's Cairo something. I get to think, why not Istanbul? Why not Budapest? Why not even Rome? Go to lots of antiques in Rome, God knows. But I loved it.
Book 2, we're off to Jordan. So
book 2 in Jordan. Oh, good. We'll get the book 2 in a minute or so. But now, Cairo's important not just for the antiques, but this is where the Arthur and Freya, who apparently were very close, become estranged. How long did they get estranged, and did this even affect her relationship with her aunt or aunt? I don't know how you pronounce it over
there. Yeah, it does. And I think it was right at the beginning of when Freya was beginning to become a hunter. So she was in her early 20s, and something happens in Cairo that kind of breaks the bond and her respect for Arthur, or what she sees it being at the time. And so she flees Cairo and she comes back to London. And there is her aunt who, is Arthur's best friend. There is a period of time where they don't speak either, and they kind of fall back into their familiar bond. But Freya never does with Arthur, and that's kind of a 20-year gap.
But okay, that's the gap around 20 years. Okay, I didn't know that. Okay, so that's interesting. Again, the fact that the relationship broke, which was at one time very close. He was basically her mentor, and things can happen. And just like anything else, you see something, you see it one way, I see it another way. Nathaniel, my editor, my son, sees it another way, and I think that's, we all don't know everything, and that's what happened there. So it's the same.
Yeah, and I think that we have different, like you say, people have different perspectives, and I think they never sat down and discussed it. They know, she pulled apart and she pulled away, and she never gave Arthur really the time to explain. And because of that, it created this massive rift that wasn't healed in his lifetime.
Right. Okay. Now, the heart of this story is a bird, a valuable antique bird. First of all, you call it a Miller's Brothers bird. Is there a Miller's Brother? And do they make birds?
So they're Martin's brothers' birds.
Oh, Martin's brothers. Oh, it's why there's no Miller's brother. That's right. Okay.
There are. So the Martins brothers were four brothers. They did quite a lot of what we call studio pottery. Then, back in the time, it was known as art pottery. They did quite a lot of other things other than the big Wally birds that are in the book. They did some quite outrageous sculptures, if you like. And at the time, they were seen as very different. They were made by four brothers. So the four brothers were Wallace, Walter, Charles, and Edwin. And each of them had a role within the pottery shop. And I love the story that one of them, and I can't remember which one, ran the shop, but he loved Wally birds so much that if people came in that he didn't think really should be taking a Wally bird home, he used to hide them. So he'd hide them under the desk so that they couldn't be sold because he, was so attached to these birds. And I love that. And I think I wanted a central antique in the book that was really iconic that people could look up and go, oh, do I like that? They've got massive talons and they're very dark and ornate and quite big. And so, my mum and I came up with the idea of the Martins Brothers Wally bird being one of the antiques.
Now, you got to know, the whole time I'm reading about this bird, I'm thinking of the Maltese falcon. I'm thinking we're searching for the falcon. We're going to scratch that thing and it's not real. But there's really a Martin Brothers Wally bird. That's pretty neat.
Yeah, and I really wanted to put quite a lot of real antiques in the book because that's the world I grew up in. I know that in a lot of books, sometimes they use an antique, but they've kind of made up, the diamond tiara or whatever it is. And this time I really wanted to have real antiques that people could look up and maybe learn a little bit about and kind of spark some interest in my readers.
Great. As we've been sitting here chatting and we talked about my buddy Lovejoy and everything else, I'm beginning to wonder, are antiques part of a black market at all? Is there something like a black market antique?
Sure, there is. I mean, the black market is, somewhat unknown. I mean, you can never really know how big it is. I've read articles that have said that it's worth $50 billion. I've read articles that have said that the FBI crime team, I think they're called, removed in 1 year $80 million worth of antiques and art from the black market because they're used as collateral. I mean, cash can be traced, bank transfers can be traced, but a Picasso sketch can't really if it's been on the black market for a very long time. So they're used as collateral in trade deals across all forms of the black market. So in drugs and, gun trafficking, human trafficking, whatever, criminal activity, there is quite a lot of, art and antiques being used within that.
Oh my word. And they're all originals? There are no forgeries? I mean, this isn't anything like that?
Well, who knows, really? I mean, within the book, I try to lightly touch on the reason why there is a black market and how very prevalent it is, and how especially the US and the Italians have massive teams who are trying to track down these individuals that are dealing in these black market antiques and trying to reclaim these items.
Yeah. Interesting. That's interesting. There was a robbery at the Gardner Museum in Boston, Massachusetts, back maybe the 90s. They stole paintings. And I'd read that they were using those paintings on the black market. You would pay. You can't afford somebody for reason to be traded. They'll give you the painting from the Gardner Museum. And then that got traded to somebody else. And I'm assuming someone out there verifying this is really the painting and everything else. And never been found. So interesting. Very interesting. Wow. You have one character in here who just is fascinating. And it's not the main character. The main character is Freya, but this lady's name is Bella. Tell us a bit about Bella, if you would, please.
So, to give no spoilers away, but Bella is Bella comes into the book as a kind of downtrodden girlfriend of someone at the Cockthorne Manor, which is where Freya goes to hunt for antiques, or she's on the hunt. She's been sent there by Arthur. And Bella is one of the guests at this Cockthorne Manor. And Freya feels, I think, quite sorry for her at the time. Her boyfriend's quite overpowering and quite dominant. But over time, Bella is probably not all she seems to be. And I love that. I love the duality in characters, that especially in murder mysteries, actually you have to get to the bottom of everyone there, all of the characters, because no one really is who they seem to be at the very beginning.
That's very true. That's very true. You kept us guessing, not just what's going on and what's the final, but who's who and what's what and what are they really after? And yes, very, very well done. And Bella's a wonderful, wonderful character. I like her a lot. Wow.
I love Bella. She's great writing.
I bet she is. Was she one who did you expect her to be that interesting? When you started out, did you have Bella as that important of a character?
No, Bella certainly was one of the characters. Some of them were definitely always going to be who, Franklin, Giles, Amy came to me kind of fully formed in a way. Bella was someone who definitely grew into her own.
Okay. All right. Good. Well, that's wonderful. And I hadn't spoken about this with you, but what part of your book, yes, somebody who lives, or there's a little outhouse or something like that away from the thing, and is it an escape hatch or was it a house or what is that?
The Folly. Do you mean the Folly?
I have no idea what a folly is.
I know, it is. It's a very British term. I think Victorian times and a bit earlier, if you had a huge stately home, as you do, Victorians used to walk a lot, especially the Victorian ladies. And so it was thought a really fun idea to build something much like, little mini castles or little turrets or something to look at on your way walking around the ground. And they were called follies. And in a lot of them, it was just kind of one room. So you could go on a walk, you could stop at the folly, you could have a cup of tea, because obviously you had many servants to provide the tea. And then you would walk back. So, and I love this idea. And I've been to quite a few kind of national trust houses or estates, and there have been a couple of follies. And I think as a child, I was just intoxicated by them, because a couple of them do have little battlements and they just looked really enchanting. So I always wanted to put a folly in my book.
So I can go on my Google and Bing or wherever, and I can look up a folly and I'll find maybe some picture. But I had no idea what this was. And that's neat. But thanks for bringing that term and that whole thing to us. That's really good. I want to talk about reproduction. That's one of the things. Is there a difference between a reproduction, a restoration, and do people try to deliberately make one thing not look as valuable as it really is? Is that something? In Lovejoy it was, okay? Lovejoy always had reproductions.
Yeah, a reproduction is just something that is made to look like, a Chippendale chair. And it's quite obviously a reproduction. It's obviously far newer. If you're talking about a fake, then that's when they are trying to age something to a point that looks like it could be an original. And therefore they're trying to pass it off as that original. And I think both things probably exist. I don't know about the fakes because luckily I'm not a dealer.
Could you explain to us Arthur put red dots on things. What did a red dot mean when it was on an antique?
So I don't know where I heard this, interestingly. I think maybe it's almost an old wives' tale, but I had been told that way back in the day, and I think I'd read it in some kind of articles or whatever while I was researching, that there was, before my parents had the antiques guides and, the internet came along where you could just Google what something was worth, there were some perhaps dealers that would do something to identify the fact that, this price could be variated or variable, considering who would come in. So if it was a tourist, maybe they'd put the price up.
Okay, that's okay. Buyer beware, Going back to your mom, it was, like I said, preeminent in the trade. Was she always into the antiques, or is this something that grew on her? How long was she in doing this?
Sure. No, she didn't grow up in antiques. She grew up quite humbly on the Scottish borders. She was Scottish. And my father had the idea to do the antiques guide because he used to work part-time. He was a photographer, but he worked part-time in an antique shop. And he realized that there was no book, there was no log for someone to go to and say, how much is, this Chippendale chair worth? So a few years later, he started the Lisle Antiques Guide, and then a few years later, my mother and him started the Miller's Antiques Price Guide. And I think that she had an interest already, for sure. And by doing the guides, it created a huge amount of knowledge in her. And the guides were so general that then her knowledge became very general. And in the antiques trade, that's quite rare. Most people specialize. And she always had things that she loved to collect. And she was very expert in certain things, but she absolutely had a very general knowledge, which was amazing.
Well, tell you what, she did a heck of a job. She raised a great daughter who knows a lot about this business. I'll tell you what. And, it's I learned so much. And this is such a good book. And I'm not just saying it because we're on an interview, but I love this book because there are twists, there's turns, there's duality of people, and they're looking at things. We got, Arthur's dead. Why? What happened? What's going on at the manor? I mean, this is a lot going on. How many pages is the book? Around 300?
Yeah, I think it's about 307, is it? I might just be dealing words, so it's 84,000 words.
Oh, good. All right, now we know. It's 84,000 words. Good. All right. Now, my one question was going to be what's next, but you told us what's next. You say there's another book coming. Is that correct?
That's true. And it's just been handed in to my editors. It's called The Antique Hunter's Death on the Red Sea. And so Freya and Aunt Carol are off on an antique specialist cruise to the Red Sea to hunt a missing antiques expert and some stolen antiques.
Ah, okay. Wow. Now, you just gave that to the editor. How long is that going to take till it comes out? Is it going to be published this year, do you think?
So that's probably going to be out early 2025.
I've got to wait another year.
Got to wait another year. I'm on a book a year. It's quite fast. But yeah.
All right.
I have a good deal, so there should be. It's coming.
So we know there's going to be a third one. And when you say a 3-book deal, it's about the same characters, basically. Freya and her aunt. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So
and maybe Bella. Maybe. I don't know. Have to see. But
maybe Bella wants to go on a cruise. Who knows?
Maybe. I'll tell you. But okay. And do you have any other ideas perking up there about other types of books? Or do you think as we move forward, you're going to be specializing all in antiques?
Yeah, so the Antique Hunter series will be set in the antiques world. So when I got my book deal, I got a 3-book deal, and those 3 books had to kind of be planned. I had to give them a synopsis for each one. So that's kind of set. And after that, who knows?
You don't know yet. You haven't thought beyond that. Maybe they'll like it so much and say, hey, about 4, 5, and 6,
You never know. I'd be delighted. But
Maybe Freya and her aunt come over here to Greenville. You can come to Greenville, South Carolina, and do your research with us. Well, yeah, I'll tell you, with antiques, it's a fertile ground because everywhere you look, there are loads of antiques, and there are loads of things that are being stolen, unfortunately. Antiquities that are being stolen. They take them from, as you say, from different countries, maybe from Cairo, maybe from Istanbul. I know a lot coming out of Rome and a lot of Italy things. It's everybody but me, I think, has this fascination with collecting antiques. And I don't think it's ever going to stop. Do you?
No, I think we love kind of the research and the hunt. I think people love to hunt for something. They start a collection and then there's one piece in the collection that's a rare find. And it's that joy of the kind of the hunt, of the finding of it.
Wow, that's really good. Now, when you write, do you write every day? Do you write a certain time of day? Or do you write certain seasons and take certain seasons off to do research?
Well, now luckily enough, I'm a full-time writer and I do write almost every day. I've handed in book 2 now, so I'm on a bit of a break. My edits will probably come back in a few weeks and then I'll be back to every day. And I write, I guess, in the mornings, a few hours each morning. I can get much done and then I kind of get a bit brain fried. And I can't keep doing. But yeah, I do every day.
Okay. I had a lot of writers tell me that they'd like to write in the morning. I had one lady, though, very nice lady. She said she likes to have her coffee. She likes to get up and do her exercises. And she never gets around to writing till after lunch. And she writes till her kids come home. Pretty good idea. Yeah. Another lady who said, I don't write in the summer. It's too hot. Okay. It's a problem.
I think as any creative, you just have to find your rhythm, really. Once you find out what works for you, then we all get a bit superstitious, I think, in sticking to it because we know we've produced a book in this way. So we're going to just keep doing that way in case the gremlins come and we can't write.
Oh, that's something. I like those beams are nice. I keep looking at the beams. Let's look at the beams up there in their house. That's really neat. They're 1,000 years old or 700. How old are those beams in that house you're at?
This house is 1548. It's a little workman's cottage that when we bought it, was derelict. So we've done up the house and there was a massive workshop that we've also converted. But it was basically a 2 up, 2 down. And actually, when we got here, we pulled, the wall was all cracking and we started to take a bit down and we found a big inglenook fireplace, which was really lovely.
There you go.
So, yeah.
Great. Well, that's wonderful. You've been just delightful. I thank you so much. Your book's I just love it. The Antique Hunter's Guide to Murder. It's a great book. I enjoyed it. It's a fun read. It keeps you going. Great job, Kara. Great job.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me. It's been such a joy to chat to you.
Very good. Friends, we'll be right back. Well, I told you learn a lot about antiques. I had a great time interviewing Kara Miller. She is wonderful. You also found out that one of my favorite shows is Lovejoy. So if I'm going to look at anything, I'm looking to find Lovejoy on my cable or streaming channel because it is such a good show about the antique industry. What else am I looking at? Words like folly. I want to go and find what a folly looks like. Okay, that's really fascinating. And a wally bird. What is a wally bird? We had a hot dog stand here in Greenville called Wally Dog, but I never heard of a wally bird. So that's what I'm looking at, folks. Hey, listen, it's been a lot of fun with coming to you today. So I hope you've enjoyed it. Keep watching us, keep subscribing. And on behalf of viewsonbooks.com and on behalf of my good friends at Podcast Studio X, this is Blaine DeSantis for Books and Looks, saying may all your leaves be pages in a book.